Welcome back, everybody. This is Keith again with the Anxious Mammal. So we have spent the first few presentations identifying what trauma is, what it looks like diagnosed, how it impacts and interferes with your daily life. And we are going to move into discussing how to work on healing it. So this is an approach that um, I put together just with the information that exists out there, but this is the approach that has worked well for me when I'm working with my clients to make them feel comfortable and not feel overwhelmed or so worried to begin to actually work on healing their trauma. So this is just a suggested roadmap. Again, the client is the driver, and so they can go down any twists and turns and side roads that they want, but if they don't know where they want to go, then this is kind of the path that I aim towards. So the LEAP approach is lay the foundation. So you want to resource the client and make sure that they have what they need in order to feel like they can even focus on therapy. So that may be they might need housing resources, food resources, clothing, parenting, support groups, anything like that that they need to be able to actually be available and present to start working on trauma. And to be clear, this is an approach for anything. It's not just trauma. The next is educate. You need to provide them the information. They need to understand what is trauma, where does it come from, how does it impact the mind, how does it impact the body, and how do they communicate. This lays a really good foundation for them to understand all the interventions and the incoming information as you move forward. Your client's going to be much more willing and able to follow through with suggested coping skills, activities, exercises, whatever, if they understand the reasoning behind it and you don't just blindly tell them, just breathe in for 4 seconds and breathe out for 4 seconds and just do that. Well, they need to understand why. They need to understand that that triggers the autonomic nervous system to shift over to the parasympathetic side and activates the vagus nerve, which then triggers various parts of the body to calm, turns on the digestive system. It basically triggers the fight or flight response to come off. So if they know that, they're much more likely to do these interventions that maybe they aren't really sure about what they are, if they'd work, and they're also not seeing immediate results with some of these things. They have to understand that it's an accumulated effect. Next is focus on acquiring skills. So you want to help them improve their ability to manage the symptoms they experience now. We don't need to start going and revisiting and opening up wounds and causing more things when they are not adequately resourced with coping skills. So you need to identify and practice coping skills like body regulation techniques, progressive muscle relaxation, tapping, deep breathing, box breathing. You can do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding techniques, noodle techniques of relaxing the body, vibroacoustic. There's a ton of things that you can help teach them immediately so that they can better manage the symptoms when they arise and be better prepared to deal with the symptoms that are going to show up once you start processing the trauma. Okay? The very last thing that I do when I work with an individual is focus on the trauma. So the very last step is process and heal. And this is to build resiliency. So this is where I would use EMDR or other interventions that I use. I wouldn't use it until this because everything else needs to come before it. Okay. So, and I let my clients know this process. I tell them, listen, we're not going to work on the trauma. You're not going to have to talk about it. We're not going to go after it for a long time. We got other things to do first. So that could be in a couple sessions, in a few sessions, or it might be in quite a few sessions. It just depends on them. But I'm not going to rush them towards the fire if they don't even have a fire extinguisher available to help. Okay? So this fits in well with Maslow's hierarchy, which I love. It's such a simple concept, but it's so well structured to help the client identify where they need to focus. So most people should be familiar with Maslow's hierarchy. If you're not, it's simply this in front of you. And the basic understanding is if you are having an issue going on, you need to identify where does it fall. And so you shouldn't be focusing on your accomplishment, wants, and needs if you don't even feel like you have enough water or feel safe where you live. It's going to be too difficult to focus on this when your safety and psychological needs are not met. Anything built up here is going to crumble because the foundation is going to crumble, is weak. Okay, so basic needs are first, then psychological, then we talk about the top of the pyramid, self-fulfillment, achieving full potential and feeling like you really are accomplishing what you want. But you need to go in this order. So I always try and identify what phase the client is on. And they can be in two. They could be here and here. It's okay to mix these. They're still within basic needs though. So I shouldn't be focusing on psychological needs. I can resource them. I can give them support groups over here that they can look into, but that needs to be secondary to making sure that they feel safe. If they got somebody that's in the home that's unsafe, they need to solve this first before they start going to groups. Okay? Lay the foundation falls in the basic needs category. So this is about making sure that they have those physiological needs. They have housing, they have food, resources, etc., and they feel like they have general safety. Not in the sense that they're dealing with trauma, but in the sense that they don't live in a neighborhood where every time they walk out their door, 3 times out of 5 they're getting mugged or robbed. Next is educate. This overlaps into some of the safety needs and in educating them on how to do things to manage their symptoms or manage some of the things that may make their daily life complicated or difficult or scary for them. And it's also about helping them understand how to explore relationships, improve their ability to be present, improve their ability to control their emotions, and increase the chances of them identifying and maintaining significant interpersonal relationships. Okay, I'm not going to say you, but we are humans and we require social connection. It is a chemical reaction when we do so. It is meant to happen. That is one of the key things that makes us stand out from most other animals, is that we have this social need. Okay. For the A, acquiring skills, this is also going to improve their ability in their relationships because they're going to be able to navigate their emotions and navigate problems in relationships appropriately. And it's also going to improve their self-efficacy and self-esteem. And then process and heal is at the top. So we clear the trauma so that they can continue to grow their self-efficacy and self-esteem, and they can continue to chase after their dreams and actually see that they have the ability to do some of the things that they want to do. They don't have to feel, like they are out of control or don't have the ability to do these things. So let's look at these just in a little bit of detail separately. Lay the foundation. That's the L of the leap. This is where you're going to connect them with resources to ease their daily life stressors. This is case management. Okay, it's social work 101. And even if you're a therapist, it doesn't mean that you can't do case management. Personally, in the facility that I work currently, we have case managers, and I refer my clients to case managers. But I don't do so if they just need one resource like a website, or if they need to know where can I look for housing. I will refer them to case management if they need more than one little resource or a few resources. If I have the time, I'll help them myself. If I have the information already, I'll help them myself. And then sometimes I'll refer them to case management because maybe there's something new that I don't know about since I haven't been directly in the case management field for a few years, right? You need to identify the client's most distressing issue, and they are the ones that know what that is. The clinician does not know, the client knows. The client always knows themselves better than any clinician will. Any clinician who thinks that they know the client better than they know themselves, you should get a different clinician. A therapist is not there to give answers. A therapist is not there to say that they know what's best for you. A therapist is there so that they can tell you what, are some other options, some other areas that you can look to address the concerns that you bring up. But the individual knows what they need the most, and that's what the focus should be. Housing, food, resources, they have substance use going on, childcare, all that stuff needs to come before any of the mental health kind of typical talk therapy, psychotherapy stuff. That way the patient can focus. The other piece of the lay foundation is to build rapport. You need to explain your process ahead of time and explain your methods to the client so that they understand what's going on and what's coming, and give them an overview of what to expect. This is one of my peeves when I'm working as a therapist and I see other therapists do this, or other professionals, or I see, or clients tell me about how the professional did not explain anything, did not tell them anything, just said do this or call this or go there. Well, that is dismissive, and the client is likely not going to follow through because they don't understand why you told them to do that. They don't understand the importance of why you asked, and they don't understand how that's going to play into their recovery. You have to explain these things. The only excuse, and it's not an excuse, it's actually an explanation, is for not doing this is if the person is burnt out or needs to just go do something else for a little bit, because this is something that has to be explained to the client. Too many times they get dismissed, and I get clients who come to me and say that they had therapy 10 years ago, but they haven't come back because they couldn't stand the interaction that they had with that therapist or that clinician. Next is educate. Provide psychoeducation on their symptoms. Help them understand, why do you feel what you're feeling in your body? Why do you have the thoughts that you have in your mind? Why are they racing? Why do you feel confused? Why do you feel shaky, stomach aches? All the different things that can be impacted by the symptoms that they experience. Help them understand what's going on so that they can realize they're not crazy, they're not broken. Just as though they break their arm, they have pain and maybe bleeding, you have a mental um, injury, you also have various kinds of pain and symptoms. Talk about anxiety, trauma, depression, psychosis. Talk about how they impact the mind and the body, and talk about how they are related, interrelated. It is important for clients to understand that these things are normal when you're dealing with these kinds of injuries, these kinds of disorders. Help them understand that they're not crazy if they hear sounds that don't seem to be there, or see shadows that don't seem to be there, or think things that are very mean or evil or bad in their mind. Help them identify the various emotional and behavioral consequences that they might experience or do experience because of high anxiety or because of the trauma that they experienced. Tell them what the purpose is. Explain to them that the reason your heart starts beating fast is because your body's trying to shift blood to vital operations for fight or flight away from non-vital like digestion, sexual function, etc. Your blood vessels constrict, so your heart has to pump faster, harder to move the blood. Your breathing, respiratory increases because your body is trying to pull in as much oxygen as possible to fuel the movement of blood and to fuel the muscles. You start to feel shaky because you have adrenaline released into your body to heighten your senses and ability to fight or flight. You start to sweat because your core temperature is rising from all this activity, so your body sweats to cool you down. Every single thing has an explanation and a purpose. Help them understand that so they realize that they're not just in this crazy body or this crazy mind. Next is acquire skills. This is where you want to help them identify coping skills that they can use, things that they can use for proactive and reactive. They can build habits. So proactive would be doing, as we see in the picture, yoga every day or 5 days a week, doing meditation on a regular basis. These are things that increase your ability to deal with stressors as they come, so you don't hit that tipping point so quickly where you feel out of control and the symptoms start to just take off. Reactive is when you feel the symptoms, have them have things in place to manage those immediately. Pretty much every client that I deal with, after the first session, I give them a very simple 60-second regulation technique. I tell them to do a 4x4 breathing technique and a body relaxation thing that's often called noodle, which came from Eric Gentry from forward-facing trauma therapy. And it is just breathe in as you count to 4, hold your breath as you count to 4, breathe out as you count to 4, do that 4 times. Then tense your entire body, pull yourself into a tight ball and scrunch yourself tight, tight, tight to where you're shaking from it. As you've taken a big breath, and then release the breath and allow your body to collapse, just like Jello, or like he likes to refer the analogy to a wet noodle, like a spaghetti noodle. So allow your body to collapse. Those are 2 very simple techniques that take less than a minute, and they will tell the lungs and heart operation to slow down, which will send messages back to the brain telling it that, hey, this is changing, we're doing okay. It'll trigger the nervous system to shift over to the parasympathetic side, the calm side. It'll trigger the vagus nerve to activate, which is the calming nervous system. The noodle technique is just like a quick, rapid, progressive muscle relaxation in a nanosecond, and it triggers all the tension in the body to release, which is another signal to the nervous system to relax. 2 very simple techniques that might help them stay out of a panic attack. The client has to be able to identify their physical symptoms. So they can't regulate their nervous system if they don't notice the signs. So you need to explain to them and help them explore the sensations in their body so that they can notice them quicker. We walk around and then some of you can relate. You walk around, you go through the day, and then at the end of the day, you finally sit down on the couch when you get home and you go, "Oh my God, I'm tired," or "My shoulders are really hurt." Well, you've been walking around with your shoulders tense all day and they've been getting tenser and tenser as you've had more and more stress occurring. If we have more awareness and mindfulness of those things, we will notice that our shoulders are beginning to get tense. And that will actually say, hey, here's a warning sign that you're starting to get a little bit dysregulated. And then we can do some deep breathing and body relaxation as we're working. Nobody even knows. And it keeps that tension down, right? So this also helps the client to not quit because if they feel overwhelmed and they come see you 2 or 3 times and they don't get anything from you that shows them just at least some kind of relief, they're going to get disappointed. Clients are going to be impatient sometimes, especially dealing with trauma, because trauma is not something that they want to deal with for even a half a second. And if they're dealing with high anxiety and trauma and stress symptoms on a regular basis, they need to have something that shows them that there is going to be some light at the end of the tunnel. So help them identify those skills for proactive and reactive management of their trauma symptoms. Identify social opportunities. Get them connected socially so that they can practice these new coping skills and they can gain real world experience and see, hey, you don't just do these things sitting isolated in your house. You can do these things at the beach, family dinners, holidays, or out in public with strangers. I have an alarm on my phone that goes off every 30 minutes, and I have a little smartwatch that vibrates. And when that vibrates, I know that what the alarm is. It says breathe. So I take in a breath, hold it, and I release and drop my shoulders. And I do that every 30 minutes throughout the day. I'm trying to build a habit and regulate my nervous system on a regular basis. It helps if you do it consistently, especially. Last is process and heal. This is the final phase. This is to help them heal the trauma or heal what's causing them the anxiety, and then help them build their resiliency as they move out into the world. So here is where we would identify specific traumas, specific stressors, specific issues, relationships, etc. And I would probably use EMDR, but there's other things I would use: written exposure therapy, grounding techniques, breathing techniques, mindfulness-based DBT stuff, like diaphragmatic breathing, things like that, biosocial model. I would use EFT, which is emotional freedom tapping, vibroacoustic therapy, progressive muscle relaxation, vagal toning to target the vagus nerve, etc. There's a million things that you can use. This is where you start going after the trauma specifically and trying to heal. You want to help them also create a long-term plan, something that lists proactive and reactive strategies to manage these symptoms in the future. You, as the clinician, the clinician will not be in the client's life at some point. I always talk to my clients and tell them, like, listen, I will not be in your life. You will not know me at some point. I will not exist in your life at some point. That is just the reality of this relationship. So you need to know how to do things to calm and regulate yourself other than call me, which I always encourage them to call me as needed until then. But at some point, they're not going to have access to me. So they have to have those skills in place, right? My job is, I know I'm successful in my job if my client tells me, I'm good, I don't need you anymore. Not in the bad way, not because I sucked, but because I helped them to feel like they can manage these things. That's when I know I succeeded. When they say, you know what, I'm good. The stuff is good now. Don't need you. And that's when I'm, yes, that's amazing. That's great. I'm glad you don't need me. That's the goal. I already mentioned some of these, but you can use various different interventions. There's written exposure therapy, sensory motor or somatic based kind of psychotherapies like sensory somatic experiencing or sensory experiencing, or somatic psychotherapy, sensory motor psychotherapy. It's kind of interchangeable, but EMDR, IFS, internal family systems, there's all kinds of things that you can use. Remember, regulation and resources. It's helpful that you teach them at least one coping exercise at the first session so that they can leave with a little bit of hope and light and see that, maybe you know what you're doing. If you're going through And practicing regulation exercises in session, that can help because then you can make sure that they're doing it right. You can get some feedback from them so that you can learn how to do them better. You want the client to feel comfortable enough to return. They need to feel like you're competent and they need to feel comfortable with you. You need to be client-centered. LEAP is a guide. It is a recommendation. It is not a requirement, okay? Always meet the client where they are. That's social work number one. You have to constantly adjust your tone, your energy level, your facial expressions, your body language, even your humor. I use humor often in my sessions. And you know what else I do? I swear. Yes, I say very bad words sometimes. Why? Because I kind of will purposely mirror the individual that's in session with me. And it's not something that is not genuine. It is genuine. I swear all the time outside of session. But if I have a client sitting in front of me who has been speaking very highly of their religious connection, and then I won't swear, right? And I won't swear unless I don't do it until the individual does it so that I know that they're okay with it, right? So I mirror my clients and I do things that maybe other people don't think is, is okay. I self-disclose a lot too. If I feel like it'll benefit my client to feel like I'm in the trenches with them, I will self-disclose only facts. I never make things up to my clients. I do not lie because if you lie and they catch you one time, you're done. There's no going back from that. But I will self-disclose if it'll benefit the client. I will cuss if it benefits the client. I will use humor constantly if that's what the client responds to. Do what you got to do, meet the client where they are. You need to front load. You have to try and explain to the client what to expect. You have to let them know why you're doing what you're doing before you're doing it. They need to understand so they're not just sitting here watching you and saying, what is he doing? What is she doing? Why is this happening? Because then they're going to be too focused on being confused and trying to decipher what this is and being like, this is ridiculous, this is frustrating, that they're not going to listen. All right. And they're going to quit. They're not going to show up again, or, you're going to get a couple more sessions out of them and they're going to be like, see ya, this isn't working. It also allows them to be prepared for any challenges that they can expect. No promises. You should never promise your clients anything. Never promise anything. You can't guarantee anything. Be 100% honest and genuine with your client at all times. If they find one thing that you've lied about or distorted, you're done. There is no regaining trust with individuals that are dealing with trauma and coming to you and telling you their deepest, darkest secrets. Okay? Now, there's a little bit of a caveat to this. Again, one of the things I do that some people are probably like, oh my God, don't do that. But I will tell my clients that if when they come in and I talk to them, I will tell them sometimes if I feel like they're really struggling to find hope or find the reason to come to therapy, that I promise, I guarantee them that they will find relief if they work with me. But it might be 0.01 out of 100, or it could be 100 out of 100. I have no clue. However, if they use the different techniques and work with me, I can guarantee they'll see at least relief at that 0.01 or higher level. So that is kind of a BS promise, I guess, because I mean, if they do deep breathing, there's going to be an impact on the nervous system. It's just impossible not to. You cut yourself, you bleed. If you do breathing and mindfulness and body regulation, you release tension in the body. It can come right back, but in that moment, it does trigger the nervous system to start to shift towards the calm side. So you can use that little loophole if you feel like it'll be useful for the clients who are really seeming discouraged and having no hope. But be very careful and do not go beyond that. Do not promise them like, oh no, EMDR, it'll clear the trauma. It's amazing. I mean, I believe that, but if I do say that, I tell them, the efficacy of EMDR has been shown to be as high as 80% with clients. So that's pretty high with interventions. 80%, success rate is pretty dang high. But there's people that it doesn't work and it does nothing. It's uncommon, much more than it is common for it's much more common for it to work. But there's a good chance it'll work for you. But there's also a possibility it won't. But there's other interventions, and then I have a list on my board, and I'll point to it and just show them like this and this and this and this. So again, real expectations, front loaded, no promises, honest, and building hope though. So I have referenced here Dr. Gentry's forward-facing trauma therapy book, excuse me. I was lucky enough to do forward-facing training with him for a beta that he ran at a organization I used to work with some of my other colleagues. It's a really good kind of collection and presentation of the very relevant body-based trauma theory that exists right now. And it's presented in that book. That book is very easy to read. It's very straightforward. There's no, you know, excessive complicated language. And I think it's just a good book for a professional to read and a good book for anybody out there that's listening to this because you're trying to understand trauma more. And then Maslow's hierarchy, this is just, one resource that I found. This is where I was looking at for my information, but there's, 300 resources. This is something that was around in the 80s and has been revamped by him. He expanded it to like 7 levels instead of 5, but I like to stick with the basic 5. I think it does a plenty good job for what it's meant for. Okay, so that is the end of this one. Again, any questions, comments, concerns, or if you notice any discrepancies or you know that you don't think is true that I shared, please reach out and let me know so I can address them. If you leave any questions, I will get back to you with those. You can just leave those by going to my website, www.theanxiousmammal.com, and you can just click on the contact page. I think it's under About Me Contact, and you can put them there, and I will get your message and I will reply. So we will move on to the next presentation soon. I cannot remember which one it was. It's going to start looking at interventions. Now that we have the basic roadmap, we're going to talk about some specific intervention kind of categories. So the next ones coming up are like exposure therapies, somatic, which are body-based therapies, EMDR, and other things like that. So if you have any questions, please reach out, and I hope that you come back for the next one. Thank you.